Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson contained in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 103, I Have a King Who Does Not Speak. It's a fascinating study, this poem. Notice it's I have a king, it's not I serve a king, so that's fascinating in itself. Now this is another poem in some regards about longings, maybe about prayer, and Emily's relationship to deity and to theology. I think we're going to see this played out, and there is a direct reference that is going to be fascinating in our study of this poem, the allusion to a certain line that will be of some importance for us. I think that there's some biblical referencing going on that we'll obviously look into as well. Now, the assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've been introduced to our introductory set of comments as well as the preceding 102 poems we just finished with Great Caesar. When you pick up the volume of Johnson's poems of Emily Dickinson, the collection, and you start reading the very first poem all the way through, by the time you get to this poem, you've heard this kind of thing before, this tone that she's playing with, this contest, this Promethean-like contest with deity, while at the same time trying to figure out the best way to dance with the theological part of Emily's life. She says it this way: I have a king who does not speak. So, wandering through the hours, meek, I trudge the day away, half glad when it's night, and sleep, if happily through a dream, to peep in parlors shut by day. And if I do, when morning comes, it is as if 100 drums did round my pillow roll, and shouts fill all my childish sky, and bells keep saying, victory from steeples in my soul. And if I don't, the little bird within the orchard is not heard, and I omit to pray, Father, thy will be done today, for my will goes the other way, and it were perjury! Exclamation point. Now, I think there's some pretty serious subterfuge going on here. I think there's some definitely contesting of a certain theological bent, but the way that Emily plays the game is truly remarkable. Notice, as we said a few seconds ago, just right away, I have, not I serve a king. Now, when we get to poem 166, that's going to be a fun study for us, and I'll just kind of set it up for us now, just to make sure that you're at least hearing it. It's going to be this: I met a king this afternoon. He had not on a crown, indeed. A little palm leaf hat was all, and he was barefoot, I'm afraid. We're gonna hear this playing with this notion of king. Now, many have said this is obviously her reference to the Heavenly Father, to God, to the king. But notice, I have a king who does not speak. Now, I think that Emily is channeling the Psalm 13 passage. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord, forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? That notion of, hello, I'm calling to you, the writer, usually ascribed to be David in the Psalm 13 passage, and there's no response. In other words, I serve a king, or I have a king, but never speaks. So, then the dash. Wondering, and I love this word, wondering. I mean, it's a key word of reading Emily, right? Everything about her is wandering, curious. Through the hours meek, I trudge the day away. In other words, I have to live through my day. God never speaks to me. And I kind of, am half glad, she'll say it, when it's finally night and I get to sleep. Why? Because happily, through a dream, we're obviously going to think about our Freud, aren't we here? To peep in parlors shut by day. I love that she uses the word parlors because, of course, we call our series Chats with Emily. And, of course, the idea of the parlor is where we have conversing, right? So the whole notion of, she says, man, if I can, when I'm asleep, I'm so hopeful that maybe the king, God, will speak with me and to me. And if I do have this conversation in the parlor with God, as opposed to, in the next stanza, if I don't have this conversation with God in the parlor, if I do, when morning comes, go back to poem 101 and her longing for morning. When morning comes, it's as if 100 drums did round my pillow roll. In other words, it's amazing. It's incredible. If I can get some insight from the king through my dreams. And shouts fill all my childish sky. You'll remember the word childish from poem 77, by the way. And bells keep saying victory. This idea that something finally, yay, something good has happened. And then it's victory from steeples in my soul. The bells are saying victory from steeples in my soul. Is that not an amazing phrase? Steeples in my soul. And of course, the use of the word steeples will carry so many different meanings of, obviously, the steeples of the cathedral or the church or whatever. And I can't help but think of T.S. Eliot's Hollow Men, lips that would kiss form prayers to broken stone. I think Eliot learned a lot about how he challenges the authority of theology through his study of Emily Dickinson. But guess what? If I go to sleep and I wake up in the morning, I still don't have any information from this king who never speaks to me. If I don't, the little bird, and you'll remember this use of the word little already. We've seen it in 172 different poems. She loves it. The little bird within the orchard is not heard, and I omit to pray, Father, thy will be done today. For my will goes the other way, and it were perjury. Now, I think the key word of this poem is, no question, perjury. That is to say, to go against. Now, this Father, thy will be done, notice, is in quotation marks. And what's fascinating is that she's referencing two different times that this phrase gets used biblically in the Gospels. Of course, in Matthew 6, 9 through 13, it's in the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done, etc. But this comes back, of course, in Luke 22, 42, when in Gethsemane, Christ is asking that the cup of anguish, pain, be somehow removed from him, but only if it be the will of the Father, the King. And so I think the game that she's playing here is to say, I'm willing to play along and use this language, but I'm very careful about when I use it. Because a lot of times, I don't want to pray this prayer, it be thy will be done. In other words, what is she really saying in 2a? Well, I think she's making an observation that it's often hard to live with the unknown. She wants to know. If there's anything about Emily, and you're seeing this by the 102nd poem, 103rd poem, if there's anything about Emily, she's very much about, I am demanding, I want answers. I need answers. And clearly this poem is playing with that. At 2b, well, I love the idea that she's quoting Christ two different times, one from the prayer and the solicitation in the Lord's Prayer, and the other, of course, in the moment of greatest agony and Gethsemane. And I have a sense that it's really more about the Luke 22 passages she's referencing here more. At 3a, I mentioned Psalm 13. I think there's a lot of biblical referencing happening in this text. Again, how long wilt thou forget me, O Lord, forever? That longing to have some kind of a response which never comes. Think about the theophany at the conclusion of the book of Job, where Job has been asking for something similar, and then finally it appears, and God speaks out of the whirlwind and all of that. Finally, at 3b, what was a time that you actually knew this feeling of longing for answers that just never seemed to come? And to what degree does that remain the frustration of reading these poems by Emily Dickinson as well? Thank you.